Okay, good evening. We'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting for El Dorado today, September 24th, 2020. Mr. Shivers, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fellers. Present. Commissioner Hackler.
Present.
Commissioner Leeson.
Here.
Commissioner Long. Commissioner McLaren. Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Chairman Tetrick.
Here.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, the next item, approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Any questions, comments, clarifications? Okay, if there are none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, new business. Mr. Shivers.
All right, our first order of business is a rezoning application for 737 North Gordy Street, plus the vacant lot to the south. This rezoning encompasses two lots. The north lot, the 737, used to have a home on it built in 1900. Earlier this year, the city of El Dorado purchased it, demolished it, and put it up for sale. And so the applicant is in contract with the city of El Dorado to purchase that pending this rezoning. The applicant also already owns the southern lot right here in the middle. It's a vacant lot. It's never been built on before. Both of these lots are currently zoned R1 single family residential. So these lots are surrounded by actual residential up to the north and zoned for residential. To the east, there's lots of commercial uses along North Main Street. You'll see there's a mix of zoning despite those generally commercial uses. So you have some I-1 there to the east where the old Blockbuster is and the corner convenience store. C1 general business over there where the Dillons is. And then to the south, it's kind of clipped below 6th Street there, but we have a mix of commercial where Walgreens is, industrial zoning over there where the Westar substation is. And to the west of the property, we have an old rail yard and an I-1 zoned Evergy office and storage facility. The future land use map calls for low density residential in this area and northwards and commercial in the surrounding areas. If approved, any buildings on this would be required to put a buffer along the north property line. So they would be surrounded by non-residential uses on three sides, but there is a home. It's difficult to see on the north end of this property line, underneath those trees. As far as compatibility, we believe this is compatible for a few reasons. This part just hangs down there. It's surrounded by that rail yard. I don't know if you can see it, but Star Street actually goes to the west here. It's more used for railroad maintenance. So you're sandwiched between two roads that are used, commercial and industrial on three sides, and the noise and emissions coming off North Main Street and West 6th, despite that one connection of residential to the north. And furthermore, this property is actually within the 500-year floodplain, with the very tip of it in the 100-year floodplain, which extends up to the north through this neighborhood. So we are recommending approval of this, and the applicant, Mr. Roger Johnson, is here, and I'd like to invite him up to talk a little bit more about this.
Can you please give your name and address, even though he introduced you anyway?
Name's Roger Johnson. I live at 1402 West Towanda here in El Dorado.
Thank you.
So the story with this, we ended up buying, we call it the Blockbuster lot, the lot to the south at a
This one here.
auction, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. Pretty much have done nothing but mowed it since. Always had intentions of doing something on it. Through the sales of our own houses here recently, we've lost all of our storage, and we run quite a few rental properties here in town. And we thought this would be an ideal spot to build a shop, a storage shop basically, to store tractors and our mowers and trailers and things like that in the yard. So that's what we're looking to do here. We wanted to just build probably about a 50 by 70 size steel building. Few overhead doors, few walk-through doors, and that's kind of what we're after. And we do have a contract to buy the lot to the north of this lot, contingent on this getting rezoned. Because of the flood zone down in that area, it's not really an area we're interested in building properties, to build more rental properties per se. So, but this would be ideal because we could build that pad up for where our shop would be at. So.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Johnson?
Could you tell me about your buffer fence that I heard
Sure.
was planned?
So there's nothing planned yet, so that would be required if this is all successful and he builds on the property. The most common one is an 8-foot privacy fence. There's two other less common options in there that includes a landscape berm as well as a tree planting. Most commonly, it's the fencing, so there'd be an 8-foot fence along that north property line if he built on it.
That'd be a solid fence, like a wood fence, 8 foot, correct?
Correct.
That's what we
Yeah.
plan on doing, yes.
Okay. And the neighbors further to the north had no objections?
I sent out notices up to 200 feet for property owners. Based on everyone you have to wait for the public hearing,
Yeah,
but I don't think anyone has showed up
Yeah,
for that
we'll get to
case.
that point. That's after he talks.
Yeah,
Good question.
I didn't receive any phone calls about it.
Okay.
Are you planning on storing a bunch of,
Garbage and trash?
yeah,
No,
I didn't want to, like old refrigerators or anything outside of it?
absolutely not. We don't like our properties to look that way. We're not trashy type of people, you know, it'd be organized, but mainly on the outside of the shop, it might be some trailers, some implements, things like that. And we are wanting to build this possibly with putting in like an office area up in the corner, maybe put in a handicap sized bathroom in it. Because the idea with us here is potentially somewhere down the road, this could be an ideal spot for someone to put in a business, tire shop, something like that. So we don't know if we'll do that right out of the gate or not, but we are talking about maybe taking a corner and making an office area out of it, storing some room paperwork and stuff there as well. But we're not really gonna run a business out of it, we're just really gonna use it for storage. But we thought while we're doing all this, it'd be ideal time to go ahead and plumb it for a bathroom, make it handicap accessible. Because down the road, we could see potentially selling this. And it'd be a really good spot for someone to run a business out of for the size of shop we're wanting to build. So we're kind of looking at long-term on what our plans would be to get rid of it as well.
Any other questions for him? Thank you.
Yep, thank you guys.
Before we do the public comment, can we put the zoning, you had the zoning map, right?
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the middle there in the black.
Yeah.
So the light grays are the industrial zone properties, the red's commercial, and the yellow is the single-family residential.
Jay, what's the triangle that's not highlighted at all directly south of this gentleman's lot?
This is all considered railroad right-of-way, even over
Even
here.
over there, right south of him? Okay.
Yes, it's a very wide right-of-way
I
through
see.
here.
And we do have some grand ambitions to try to get a hold of the railroad and see if we can potentially attain that from them. I've heard that knowing the railroad is pretty complicated and it's not an easy going process, so no promises there, but it would be ideal for us. We've been knowing that lot for the railroad as long as we've known the other lots, so we've kept it nice and clean for them. But again, that is our goal, is to try to get with them as well, try to get that lot and see if we can get that part of it as well.
Is that actually a lot or is that a street intersection?
Technically, it's railroad right-of-way. You know, that's all I know about it. There's no lot there past his property line. So it's counted as the same way as our streets are our public roads. It's just railroad. So this is not taxable property.
Okay, this time we'll open the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak on this issue? Okay, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, is there any discussion, any more questions you guys have? Clarifications of what is what?
I think it's important that 8-foot fence is in there.
That's part of the I-1 though, right? Like that's non-negotiable when they do that?
Correct. So
Okay.
I-1, C1, anything that's non-residential here, or even R3, multifamily, if any of those went in next to that R1, that buffering requirement is kicked
Okay,
in.
great.
And that's reviewed at the site plan level then.
Good project.
Any other questions? Okay, if there are none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval of case number 20-03-REZ, an application by Silvergate Investments to rezone 737 North Gordy Street from R1 Low Density Residential District to I1 Light Industrial District for the reasons stated in the staff recommendation and heard at this public hearing.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Shivers, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Fellers.
Yes.
Commissioner Hackler.
Yes.
Commissioner Leeson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Chairman Tetrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
All right, the motion to recommend approval passes 6-0. So this will go to City Commission next, and I will be in touch with you guys.
Okay, Mr. Shivers, the next new business item.
All right, item number 2 is a special use permit application for an accessory apartment. Thank you. However, I would like to request that we table this item. Mr. and Mrs. Titus applied for this as they purchased their new home right here, as you saw in your packets. And unfortunately, after that happened, Mrs. Titus passed away, and all of her contact information was on our application, so I have not been able to contact Mr. James Titus. And so I went ahead and put it on the agenda. I've sent mailers, I've tried to call, but a lot of those things go to her former address and phone number. So I'd like for you guys to just to table it, and if we hear from Mr. Titus and he'd like to continue forward, then we can put this on the agenda in the future. If we don't hear from him or hear back that he's not interested, then we can just drop this.
Okay. Do we need to vote to table that, or do we just table it?
I think you could vote for that.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we table this item number 2
Okay.
until the next available and appropriate meeting time.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do we have a second? All in favor, say aye. Or just do it
Aye.
that way. Thank you. Motion carries. We'll table that item. Okay, Mr. Shivers, last new business item, please.
Okay. Our last one is a special use permit application for 1331 Lawndale Avenue. Mr. Curtis Lill purchased the lot to the east there about 5 years ago, demolished the house there and extended his fence over and is using that as a large side yard now. The special use permit request is for a large accessory structure measuring 40 feet wide, 60 feet in depth for a total of 2,400 square feet. The proposed height, peak height is 16 feet, which is approximately the same as his primary residence. This special use permit request is in the middle of a single family neighborhood. And so as you can imagine, the structure is larger than most of them there. To give you an idea that a lot of the houses, when I looked at them, were in the range of 950 square feet all the way up to 1,900 square feet. A lot of the building heights in this neighborhood are about the same. So I kind of did a ground level analysis to see how this might fit in with the homes to the left and right of it, to the east and west. For perspective, the proposed building is 40 feet wide at the front. Mr. Lill's house is 50 feet wide, and the adjacent owner to the east is about 47 feet wide. So it'll definitely be a little bit deeper than the other houses and less wide. So to cover a few of our criteria on these special use permits, as you can tell, not all of our criteria applies to every case. For example, this site's accessible by all of our emergency services, municipal utilities, all of those things. So what this one really boils down to is compatibility. So that's kind of the main question tonight. On one hand, we have that this is larger than all the other homes in the neighborhood. It's a non-residential building. Our ordinances put an emphasis on promoting residential structures in neighborhoods. And on the flip side, Mr. Lill is proposing to put this building back about 11 extra feet further back from his house, behind a 6-foot privacy fence, a little bit less frontage than the surrounding homes. And what we don't often see is we have neighborhood support. You probably saw all the letters that were in your packet that Mr. Lill provided. And after I sent out this packet, where my mouse is here, I forget the exact address, Mr. Ronald Freed called to ask about this and then wanted to pass along his support for this case. So he lives about 2 houses, where'd my mouse go? To the east of Mr. Lill. And so tonight, I don't have a recommendation for you. I believe that there are reasons to support recommending approval. There's also, I think, reasons to recommend denial. Just there's kind of a balance of things to consider on this one. So with that being said, I'd like to invite Mr. Lill up to talk to you more about this case.
Name and address, please.
Curtis Lill, 1331 Lawndale, here in El Dorado.
Thank you.
I guess my first question, did you read the application that I submitted for the use? I mean, that pretty well zeroes it all in what I'm trying to do. Do you have any questions?
I've got some. On the letter we just got, it increased the size of the building, because this one says 14-foot walls, this one says 16-foot walls.
No, it's 16-foot opening for the gate, is what that is. It was, let me go, which paragraph are you on?
Second paragraph.
Okay.
I'm applying for a special use permit to have a 40 by 60 by 16 metal frame.
16 high.
But this one says 14. Have you changed it, or is this just a misprint?
I think maybe to clarify, one of these diagrams shows so the sidewalls were expected to be about 14 feet,
Right.
and then the peak height was expected to be 16 up here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I wanted to stay the level of the existing houses so it didn't stick up like a sore thumb. My whole goal from everything I studied with everything was make it match the neighborhood. And so,
And you might mention the driveway change. I just
on the
passed-
driveway, when I originally plotted it out, there was already a curb cut out for the old existing house I tore down. And it was off to the side, so I kind of made a circle in. And then I thought, well, have a couple places you could put a couple cars and park. And then next thing I thought, well, people aren't going to back out. So then that led to an exit drive. And then I got the cost of it, and I thought, why am I doing this? I'm trying to keep things simple. Why not just go straight in, 14-foot wide drive to it? And there's plenty of parking on the curb. And there would be, 3 cars could park in the drive. But even where I'm at now, I've been in business for 30 years. I've had the upholstery business 23 years. But even now, I'm the only upholsterer there. And I might have 1 to 3 people walk in a day at the most inquiring about upholstery. Because a lot of your upholstery jobs take more time. And it's not, all my big high traffic is from the glass side of my business. And like I said in the deal, I'm wanting to semi-retire, move the upholstery business over in and use about 30% of that building, do it by an appointment basis only to, keep high traffic down. It's just a way for me to semi-retire, and then I'll put the glass business on the market and lease or sell the building with it. So, I did some digging in the ordinances, and it said what you can do at home and what you can't do at home. And one thing it said you could do alterations, tailoring, or seamstress work. Well, I'm not a seamstress, but I'm seamster, which is the same as an upholsterer. And that's my whole plan with the whole deal. Of course, I guess every man wants to have a man cave down the road. And, that's their too.
But the city did agree with that, that part, the seamstress part, that it's a proper use of a business at home.
So the way this process started was Mr. Lill came in, let us know he wanted to build a building, told us kind of that he's doing a semi-retirement, what he was looking to do there, and asked if that was something that he could do. Like he said, a home occupation that's allowed is a seamstress. And of course, not everything that we hear about fits 100% perfectly inside the square that is our ordinance. So we met in my office to try and figure out, is this something that fits in that category? We agreed in our meeting that it did. And so that kind of paved the way for the next step for Mr. Lill, which was what size building do I want to build and that kind of detail. So administratively, we made that determination, that interpretation of the ordinances to say that this would be fine. Obviously, it'd all be done indoors. And so that part was kind of the first decision made. And so the next step is that Mr. Lill is asking for that building that was within the special use permit size range.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what happens with the existing fence?
Okay, in the front?
Yes.
Okay, what'll be there is a 14-foot opening. The
Sure.
building sits back 10 foot. It'll have a 12-foot wide door
Okay.
and a 14-foot in the fence, and it'll have a cantilever gate. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they slide on rollers.
Right.
They're cantilevered, they're balanced out, which that will eventually be electric to open and close. But you can buy those gates, you buy the framework, and then what I'll do is take the boards off the existing privacy fence that was there and mount that to it. So when I close at night, the gate goes closed, there's just a privacy fence.
Sure.
Private security,
Right.
And I don't know if any of you drove by the lot or
I
not,
did.
but the privacy fence, when we designed that, we got one that matched what our roof color was of the house. And the other thing is our house is white with black trim, which is what we're going to design the building as so that it all blends in. And I've been at the location I'm at now 23 years, and I got a record behind me that would keep things nice.
Yeah, I mean, I drove by, I didn't notice that the roof color was the same as the fence. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that I would have, I could have probably looked at it 1,000 times, but I probably wouldn't have noticed that, but, I mean, it was in nice condition. I mean, I did notice that, so.
And that's the way I want to keep it.
And these letters went out to the business owner across the street that's developing that property, and he was in support, correct?
Yes, I believe Mr. Wilkinson was one of those,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I believe you also approached him and I sent a letter, yeah.
I went and talked to all my adjacent neighbors verbally first, because if any of them were against it, I wasn't going to pursue it. But I said, I'll be back with the plans to show you what I'm going to do, and I'll bring a deal you can read and see if you'd like to sign it. Never one signed. And so, it's good to know they want to keep me around.
Any other questions?
I'd commend you for the way you did this. And
Thank you.
approach your neighbors. That's a
I
good,
learned-
honest way to do that.
I learned from everybody else's mistakes.
Yeah.
I've been here 30 years, so, and I've made some along the way too. I never stop learning. So,
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, we will close the public hearing. Any discussion amongst the commission?
Mr. Shivers, the setback is set in stone, right? When we talked about the distance it's gonna be back and can't be moved forward.
There's a minimum of 40 feet. I believe you're proposing 50 or 51?
Close to 60.
Was it closer to 60?
Yeah.
Okay,
Because of the 10-foot extra setback behind the fence.
okay.
Okay.
Now that's from the property line, not the curb, right?
That's from the curb.
Okay, 60 is from the curb, yeah, so it's about 50 from the actual property line.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and that's drawn to scale, correct? The-
So,
This big one.
and I put this box on here, I did this myself, this is pretty close to scale.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
tried to
'cause-
compare it to the neighboring.
I mean, it's kind of smaller than his whole house with, by the time you get the building in the back too. So, I mean, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, I also had to convince my wife to.
Okay, I've got this is for you, Jay.
Sure.
We got new houses going in across the street,
Mhm.
wanting to build a big building. What's the difference in this one than South Emporia? I know of one person that lives in the area over there.
Mhm.
She lived a little ways away, but she can see your house. She's not too happy with the giant metal building we can put in.
It's not giant
Well, and the difficult part is that every case is different and every neighborhood's different and you get different feedback from different neighbors. I mean, that's all we can do is look at each one as its own case.
Cause see, I kind of compared this one to the one on Denver. Is that street?
Mr. Ewert's?
Yes, that it's in an established neighborhood where there's trees and houses on all sides. And that other building on South Emporia, there is no houses on the north side of that. I mean, they're pretty hard to compare, those two. But if you drive by the building on, I think it's Denver, it could be Atchison, I don't even remember. But that building doesn't stand out, and it's the same size as this proposed building.
And Wade's name was on, Wilkinson's name was on one of those letters.
Yes.
Correct.
He owns those lots.
I mean, he's the one that's trying to subdivide and sell those lots, and if he doesn't have an issue with it, that it's not gonna affect the property value, I mean, I think he would know more than me, to make that determination.
But still putting a building that's got more square foot than pretty much any house in the area. So what if it doesn't stick up higher?
I think the difference is everybody signed off on it, all those letters. Everybody said,
We've never had that before, never. Not even, normally we have one maybe, it does that,
I
not
think the
that
big
many.
one's
South Emporia, the guy had no objections whatsoever except for the guy trying to sell the lots. This is another case of over on Denver, dilapidated neighborhood. This one is a fairly decent and upcoming and growing neighborhood.
And Wade's trying to sell the lots and he signed off on it. As opposed to the other one, the owner of the lots didn't want it.
So across the street, if somebody wanted to buy 2 lots and throw a giant building in there, you're gonna be fine with that one too.
No, it's a case-by-case basis, but there would be nothing surrounding the one across the street. It would be an empty lot to the other side. That's the difference to me. That all you're gonna see on this is the front of the building, is all that you're gonna see. Because it's not gonna stick up above, and you're not gonna see the back of it from anywhere.
If there was one neighbor that said no, I would be hesitant.
It would be a lot different
I
to
would
me.
hesitate greatly.
Or if the developer across the street that is knowing what his property value is gonna be affected by.
Absolutely.
I'm not against metal buildings in neighborhoods, but to put one in that's bigger than any building in the neighborhood, yes, I am against that.
But if I could add, the house I tore down was over 2,000 square feet that I tore down. It was a big 2-story house that stuck up way above all the neighboring houses. And it was a house that people that lived there 10 years didn't do one iota of maintenance or cleaning. The bathtubs were black inside. It had mildew, it had termites, the basement had leaked forever. And when I found out who was gonna live there, I bought it the next day and tore it down. It's the best thing I could ever do.
I mean, I think that's where we have to be careful, because there's nothing stopping anybody from coming in and building a house like that tomorrow.
Yep.
I mean, look at that house on Summit. You know, that's considerably taller than anything in that neighborhood. And there's no regulation that could control that. I mean, I go back to there's been no complaints from any neighbors, and even the contractor that's trying to sell the lots across the street signed a letter supporting it. I mean, and all you're gonna see is the front of the building, and it's not gonna be taller than the house. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at.
I would concur.
What's, just out of curiosity, Jay, what is the general width of a 2-car garage? Was it 25, 30 feet?
Nah.
I mean, your average parking size width is a minimum 9 feet, so I'd say probably 12 foot per side.
Yep.
If I had to guess, say 24 foot
Plus the
minimum.
standout walls, so you're looking at,
Of course, we have an architect on the board that might have better
He must not do
information.
2-car garages, because he's not speaking
I was
up.
just thinking about, as a comparison, that if Mr. Lilt was, you know, of course, this would be closer to his home, if he was to say, I just want to add another 2-car garage there, how much different the width would actually be in comparison, and he might, if he did that, he might not even want the fence that's going to be covering up the front of the new building. To me, he's got no neighbors to the south, it's railroad right away and street, and what I'm trying to envision of what it's going to look like after it's built, most of the building's going to be covered up by a fence that's already there. You're not going to see much different except for what's the same height as the house that's currently there. So it's not like it's going to be up on a hill that it's like, oh my God, look at that thing. I don't think it's going to be that obvious.
And he could build a metal building anyway, right? That meets, so, I mean, that there would be a metal building there, and there's nothing we could do to stop that, regardless if that's what he wanted to do. Just the size that would be affected. And I mean, if you're gonna build it as deep as that, and I mean, I don't really think you're gonna notice it very much. And my whole thing comes, you know, I've said it comes back to the neighbors. If even one person was upset, you know, or had a complaint, but none of them, all in support in letter format that we've never seen. So.
That's the only concern I got is, if he kicked the bucket, for instance, what's gonna go in there next?
Well, nothing can, right? Because,
If anybody had to have a business, they would have to get it reapproved.
yeah, that special use permit stops.
Well, the special use permit's for the building.
But he couldn't have a business in in a
Correct.
neighborhood.
Right.
I
I
mean,
mean, we have a list of home occupations that are allowed, and there's a number of restrictions on that, like you can't create abnormal traffic patterns, or emissions, or odors, or all these things that you don't want in your neighborhood. So we have the criteria, and then a list of permitted home occupations, prohibited, and a couple by special use permit, which we've done before, like an in-home hair salon. So anyone that wants to purchase this in the future and wants to do anything other than work on their cars, you know, the usual hobby stuff or man cave, if it's a home occupation, they'd have to come talk to us.
but see, that also goes back to, he could build a building anyway, and, I mean, so, technically, we couldn't stop any of that. I mean, it would, he could build that
Owns a
building
lot,
tomorrow.
He can put a big
He,
garage
he,
there.
he could
It
put,
could be a metal garage.
and it doesn't have to, he could take the fence down, he could move it as far forward as the setback allows. I mean, there's a lot that we couldn't control anyway, you know.
I think Mr. Little's done everything right on this one.
I agree. I mean, I think he went above and beyond what is asked, you know, due diligence wise, so.
When you boil it down like that, with his house size, he's allowed to go up to 1,500 square feet administratively by building permit over the counter. So really what you're looking at is that extra 900 from 1,500 square feet to 2,400.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's up for debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
The reason I didn't do that was because that size of building, you have to stay the same roof pitch as your house. So when you do that on that size of building, without going high, you're gonna have about an 8-foot high door to get in.
Yep.
I'd like to go back and, I guess, revisit lot combination again. We've had this discussion before, probably, most of us in the room about that. Help me understand, are these two separate lots currently?
These are two platted lots. We consider them one zoning lot. A zoning lot has multiple criteria, such as has to be adjoining, has to have contiguous ownership, and there's one more that slips my mind. And so we always have these neighborhoods that are full of platted lots, but anytime someone buys the next one over, they get it combined through the county. They do that administratively. They update all their GIS maps. It meets our criteria as a parcel or a zoning lot. It is confusing. We've considered other ways to do this, all the way up to requiring a plat for doing this. The reason it hasn't gone anywhere is the time and the financial cost to people of
cheap.
spending that few $1,000s coming to you guys to get that lot combination approved. So we've met on that topic about every other year to brainstorm, but right now this is what's been working. There's only been one instance that we're aware of in the last decade where a building was split off under the radar, and that was actually converted into a home. So I guess that worked out somehow. So lot combinations are an interesting process. We have ways for subdividing lots, but we don't have a lot of ordinance requirements for combining lots.
So for zoning and just regulatory purposes, the city considers these a single lot,
Correct. Mhm.
even though, as far as the county is concerned, and if they wanted to conduct a real estate transaction, they could sell that east lot or the west lot. They could sell either one of those independently and still maintain ownership of the other.
They would have to do a lot split process and go back through my office, in which case that's when so anyone that does a lot split, which is turning those two platted lots back into their individual lots, has to have that approval from our office that says it meets our subdivision requirements, it meets our zoning, specifically like minimum lot sizes, minimum lot width, things of that nature, and that we're not creating any non-conforming structure, non-conforming lots. And so if it meets all those, which, you know, we meet beforehand, a lot of the lot splits do meet that. I write a letter. They take that with them to the county when they file that to split them into two.
So the check and the balance is really on the back end, not on the front end.
Correct, yeah.
It's considered administratively a combined lot because of contiguous ownership.
Right.
And it enjoys the privileges of being a combined lot. But if it were to be sold as a separate lot, that's when the city is concerned with and would regulate the sale of that lot contingent upon a lot split process.
Correct.
Okay. Other question I have, if you could bring me up to speed, maybe by memory, maybe not by memory, but talk through where we landed on material compatibility in these accessory structure special use regulations?
Sure. So the last time that we discussed this and amended the regulations, we allowed an accessory structure up to 1,200 square feet or the square footage of the home, whichever was less. So 1,200 square foot home, you could build up to 1,200 square foot accessory structure. 900 square foot home, you're limited to 900 square feet. So for larger homes, we allowed an extra allowance to go from 1,200 square feet to 1,500 square feet. The two conditions, one, it had to be at least 60 feet from the front property line, so in most cases set back farther from the road than the house. And two, it had to have matching building materials where it was visible from public property. So anything you could drive by and see had to match the home. Now those were the administrative regulations. So when I met with Mr. Lill, because of his house size, he was eligible to go up to 1,500 square feet if he met the 60 foot and the matching building materials. So he knew that was an option, but preferred the larger building.
Okay, so the compatible materials, and I certainly recognize that he's intends to paint it, or have it, in a color scheme that is compatible with the home. I get all that. But because of this process, he's not necessarily obligated by the regulation to make it compatible material to the primary structure.
That is correct, unless it is a condition or on the site plan as an agreement to it.
Okay.
Right, so we did that as a way of just doing it administratively and saving time. If you can meet these criteria that we recommend to fit into a neighborhood, then you kind of get the quick way. If it's an unusual circumstance, you want something bigger that's not matching a different style roof, then we have this process.
And like most of the recommendations this advisory body makes, we can certainly create stipulations
Correct.
To our recommendation to be considered by the city commission.
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
So any conditions would have to be tied to any potential impact. So a lot of this would probably be the size or the view of it, something like that. So make sure that any condition is always tied to some perceived impact to the neighbors or the neighborhood.
Any other questions? Okay, there are no questions. Do we have a motion?
I don't have it in front of me, but I would make the motion, the written. Gerald, do you have it?
If you guys need to think for a minute, I can give you some more information on past cases. I jotted some notes down for perspective. Now, as I said, every case is different. Every neighborhood is different. But for some perspective, earlier this year, we did Nick Badway's accessory structure. That one came in at 1,500 square feet. At the beginning of the year, we did Darren Schwint's building out there on West Towanda, the large lots. That one was 1,800 square feet. Both of those were approved. And then last year, the one you mentioned earlier, Randy Ewert's building, he had initially applied for a 3,200 square foot and then brought us back a 2,625 square foot building that was approved, and that's what's there today.
Yeah.
Just for a little perspective.
Okay.
That's the one on North Denver,
Correct.
between Denver and Taylor.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And then we denied the one down in South Emporia. I think it's Emporia, down south.
It's south
And the Augsburger
I
did.
think that was back in 18, right? So these were just the ones that we've seen since we amended our accessory structure regulations last year in early 19.
Okay.
Is there something written down where you guys have, I don't have the motion in front of me? I move to recommend approval of case number 20-08-SUP, a request by Amy and Curtis Lill for a special use permit to allow a 2,400 square foot accessory structure on the property located at 1331 Lawndale Avenue, for the reasons set forth in the staff recommendations and heard in this public hearing.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Shivers, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Fellers,
Yes.
Commissioner Hackler,
Yes.
Commissioner Leeson,
No.
Commissioner Stewart,
Respectfully, no.
Chairman Tetrick,
No.
Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
All right, the tally is 3 yays and 3 noes. That means this will go to the city commission with no recommendation. Now, they will have the minutes and the video of our discussions here, of course, but we just will not forward a recommendation. Split vote.
Okay, Mr. Shivers, do we have any old business?
No old business.
Any staff items?
We have 2 applications pending for next month, so we are planning on an October meeting.
Okay, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.